to come onto you as part of your job? Like, obviously, you're arming the boom, but are you also having to kind of like pay attention to leveling, or is there someone else who's kind of behind you, almost dealing with that side of it
So
to
I
help
think
you out?
this gets into your question about how the sound department's set up on a film set. So we tend to be a crew of 3, maybe 4. Historically, it was just a crew of 2. You had the sound mixer and the boom operator. And the sound mixer was the head of department, and they're in charge of, recording, setting the levels. They provide a mix of all the tracks. Back in the day, obviously, that was only a boom or 2, whereas now could be 8 tracks, maybe more, a couple of booms. Everyone's now wearing a radio mic. And also their mix while they do it, it's not becoming so important because it's so easy now, as you know, to just dump everything into Pro Tools and you have all the tracks and you can just take what you want. Whereas historically, they just had the mix, and if the mix was bad, you would have to go again.
Yeah,
basically, they'd say, let's go again.
ADR and back to it.
Yeah, or ADR, which for those people who don't know, is basically you can replace the dialogue at a later date. With technology, it's getting a lot easier to do. I think it's a great tool, but it's quite often relayed back to us, when maybe I'm getting in people's way or something like that. They go, well, what about ADR? Well, for me, the whole point of us being there on a set is to capture the performance of the actor.
Absolutely.
And the story. And I think by not capturing the dialogue there and then we're doing a disservice to that performance. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some actors, and there are plenty of occasions where you might want to replace it to change the performance or adjust it or have another go at it. It's a great tool, but our job is there to capture the performance. And so I think one of your questions kind of covers this. It's about, like, we're there mostly to get the dialogue and to get the dialogue as clean as possible. So, for anyone watching now, like, just pause the podcast for a minute, have a listen to what's going on around you. You can probably hear traffic outside, like my building now. I have an AC unit running. The world is noisy. And when you just put it down to one microphone that can't have the selection like our ears can, it's very noisy. So we have to do our best to limit that. And one of the sound mixer's responsibilities is in pre-production to, make sure these things are dealt with, that we don't turn up on a set that's too noisy, or, there's equipment that's too noisy, or the way the set's constructed causes an issue. All these things. And then when we're there, we've got to, we're laying down carpet, we're trying to dampen the acoustics, we're trying to remove footsteps, because in the edit, you don't want mismatched footsteps.
No.
They can add those back later. So we're just trying to capture the dialogue as clean as possible. And getting it on the boom is our dream, because, as you can imagine, like, the microphone there in front of your face is going to sound way better than something that's
Absolutely
tiny. And also, there's a sense of perspective to it. It sounds the way it should sound. Anything that's on the chest, whilst they've got better and better as time has gone on, they don't quite match the shot.
Well, you don't get the space, do you? You don't get the room, and I suppose in the same way that really, if as you've highlighted, if an actor is performing a part, they are also performing it in a room. Now, obviously, I know a soundstage I've been in some, we've been in loads. They're dead, which is great, because then you can really kind of get in there and really gain those mics, because you've got that opportunity. I think it's kind of, one of the questions I was kind of talking about was the radio mic thing, and kind of, I always think this, because the ADR thing, I can actually see it. That doesn't. Not all the time, but sometimes I'm watching a film and I'm like, he didn't say that, or she didn't say that.
Especially, like, I just, with the lockdown, we've been rewatching things. I just, with the wife, she'd never seen Band of Brothers, so we watched it. And there's so many lines that have been inserted in there, and they're not a replacement. They've just been put in to add to the story, which is fantastic that you can do that. But to me, it sticks out.
That's right.
when James Bond is stood up against a wall with gunfire and bolts and everything, and you can hear his line clear as day.
Yeah.
It's ADR, but we're getting better at it. We're certainly getting better at trying to deaden down those situations. But to me, it sticks out.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes me out of the film, and I suppose that's where a combination maybe of a radio and a boom, I suppose, could then perhaps help to add the clarity.
So radio mics have kind of become the norm too, because now we don't just shoot with one camera, we shoot with 2, maybe 3. There were times on the Avengers where we were shooting 4 because we actually only had maybe 2 weeks of all the cast. And so they want to put 4 cameras on it and cover it because we haven't got time. This is very, in a 6-month schedule of a film, we've only got 2 weeks where you have all the Avengers. So you have to,
get on with it.
Yeah,
literally.
And so that's why you need, and the radio mics are a great tool for that, and they sound better. They don't always work because they're at the mercy of whatever costume they're wearing. Now there's a lot of collaboration you can do with costume, and they can choose the right fabrics to make your life easier, and the different techniques that you can use to mount the mic in there. If it's even in the costume, sometimes we put it in the hair, sometimes it's in a hat. There's all kinds of things we can do
with it. I remember that. Ages ago. I remember it was like, "What are you working on, Mike?" And you're like, "I can't tell you anything. I'm not talking about it. I'm working on Avengers." And it's like, "Okay, well, what have you been up to?" Trying to mic up Scarlett Johansson's suit. It's a nightmare. And I think then it was like the conversation very quickly stopped after that, and we just went back to the bar. But it's like
I remember, and it's a funny story because the mixer I was working for, Peter, he lives in Northern Ireland, so he said, "Hey, can you go into Shepperton and speak to the costume, the people that were making the super suit team, about where we can put the radio mic transmitter?" So I went in there, and they were great. They were fantastic. And they said, "We're thinking of the tool belt and how big's the pack?" So I left them with the pack, and we started coming up with all these plans of how it would fit in and where the cable would, and we'd extend the antenna, make everything work fantastic. Now, I think this was probably 6 or 7 weeks before we started shooting Avengers. 4 weeks before we started shooting Avengers, it was announced that Scarlett Johansson was about 3 months pregnant. And basically, she was stood there in her suit, 3, 4, 5 months pregnant while we were shooting. And I was like, didn't matter anyway. We could have just put it on because they could only really cover in a close-up, and anything else wide, if it was her, was either a body double or VFX or somewhere between the two. Or I think they also did some additional photography after she'd had the baby. But yeah, that's certainly on the bigger films, that's a lot of work that needs to happen before you arrive on the set. Like last year I was on The Boys, the Amazon Prime show, and that's again a lot of super suits. Lucky it was season 2, so
that's funny, man. That show,
it's a great show.
It absolutely. I wasn't ready for it. Like I kind of just put it on, and I was like, "Wow, this is funny." Like it hits the nail on the head. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I was trying to explain it to someone who else who worked on it the other day, and I kind of think it's kind of like some of the best sci-fi shows, like Battlestar, where it's not so much about superheroes. It's the story around it, and that's bang on to society today, right? And that's what's so great about it.
Absolutely. It really kind of... Because when I first put it on, I thought, oh, is this going to be another sort of, DC, Marvel sort of TV show? And it absolutely wasn't that. Yeah, I think you're right. No. It definitely highlighted... It definitely brought society into it. I thought, I loved it. And it was well balanced, I think, in terms of like the superhero stuff and then the real stuff and then the comedy. And the characters were brilliant. So yeah, that was a cool show. But sorry, I've interrupted you there, man. You were telling me about
that's okay. Sound. I had a lot of fun on that show. I was unfortunately my back had got injured, which is not great for a boom operator. So I was on The Boys as a sound utility, which is the third member in the crew. But on The Boys, because it's superheroes, the utility who deals with a lot of the radio miking, certainly in Canada, has a lot more responsibility. So I took that show. Unfortunately, I got sick on the show and I had to have time off. I ended up in hospital. There were a few things, but I did love that show. I thought it was great. And I was very fortunate that was the show I took because of all the situations that I had going on. but yeah, I hope season 2 comes out this summer. But I'm slightly wary that Amazon might be slowly dragging out their releases as we're not making TV shows.
Yeah,
they're gonna drag them out a bit.
I think you're right. I mean, that's one of the questions I had at the end was what we'll cover that towards the end about obviously COVID and what we're going to do with regards to the industry. I suppose we spoke a bit about the whole the sound team structure on set. Obviously that was very much from like a I suppose from a full production, full budget point of view.
Yes.
I would imagine there's definitely a difference between TV and film, or is that something that those gaps sort of merge now?
I think there might have been once upon a time. I think it is blurred because now TV and film are kind of blurred. Like I say, I work in TV, but I don't make many shows that go on TV anymore. They're Amazon or Netflix, and
which are films.
Quite often they're with the same budget. You know. So we do the same. I mean, I think Star Wars, we were like 4, maybe. But TV is mostly three-person team. So the sound mixer, as I said before, who's, the big cheese and is responsible for everything that goes on in pre-production and what happens on the set. They're in charge. They record and mix. The buck stops with them. The boom operator, which is what I primarily do now, runs the floor for the sound mixer, is responsible for the microphone placement on the set. And, because the sound mixer can't be on the set with their gear. They have a big cart. They normally sit just off the side of the set. So the boom op is there working with the camera operators and the first assistant director who runs the floor and doing that. And then on top of that, you have the utility or assistant who fills the gaps, comes in, does the second boom if the 2 booms are required, which is becoming more the case as we cross-shoot with 2 cameras. They hand out the headphones, they do all the cabling that's required, although there's less and less cabling required as we go on. And they help with the boom operator, laying carpet. We're trying to reduce the other sounds on set.